I have been reading this book. It's called Surveillance Capitalism, and I know that I always talk about books, but this time I'm going to try and do something a little different. I've actually read up so much on this topic that I'm not going to give you a book review as such. Even though I don't feel like I'm qualified to talk on the topic, I still have a lot of opinions about it. So after I read this book, I went online and I read a quote somewhere which I thought, A, what a personal attack, B, also so accurate. It said, and I don't know who this quote is by, but it said, never before has a generation so diligently documented itself while doing so little. Which, as you can see, completely true. Not that I'm doing very little. I mean, I just sit around in a chair and talk to a camera. Also, I've noticed that in a lot of the videos, I just say so yeah because I have so many thoughts and I don't know how to articulate them properly in front of a camera. Like if I'm talking to people that are my friends, etc., I'm usually really chilled out and I think I sound like a very smart conversationalist. But as soon as I'm in front of a camera in a room alone where I can't hear the other side of the conversation, so to speak, I become very self-conscious. It's a little bit like this thing I read about how George Eliot used to do most of her writing. She herself, whenever she talks about her writing, says it's a very painful process for her and she has to really pull it out of herself to, put it down on the page. And she called every single book that she's produced an actual labor. I don't know if she had any kids, and she says that the thing that she finds the most difficult to do when she's writing, and what she imagines to be an issue a lot of the other writers face, is the fact that as a writer, you write things down and you bare your soul or whatever. But the only thing you get in return is silence, which is a lot like talking into a camera, because I imagine a lot of my jokes landing, but I can't really hear the reaction. It's also, I think, a sense of discomfort in front of the camera, which I'm trying to get over. So there is this concept. It's called a panopticon. I hope I've said that word correctly. I say this a lot. I should really check up on the pronunciation before I start shooting my mouth off on it. But it's called a panopticon, and in a sense, it's supposed to be a dystopian prison, I think, and all the cells are arranged in this circular building, and in the center you have the guard tower, which has a bunch of mirrors arranged very intelligently such that every single prisoner in his cell, which is located at an equal distance from the guard tower, thinks that the guard is watching them continuously all the time. I think it's imagined as a form of psychological torture, not torture maybe, but like definitely psychological discomfort. And there's this idea in a book which is called Crowdsource Panopticon that says that instead of the guard tower, the person monitoring us is every other person in society by virtue of the way we document ourselves. So in a sense, this third eye, which is the camera, and like nobody's forcing me to do it. I do this because I enjoy it. But this sense that there's always somebody watching you and that every single mistake of yours has been documented, either voluntarily or, just because we live in this age, makes us censure and police our own actions a lot more than we would otherwise do. So there are a lot of opinions that you may have, but you would have said them quite freely a couple of years ago, and maybe this is a good thing because some of the opinions are trash, no offense, but now you just wouldn't because you already have an idea of how it will be perceived by other people. So you have this sort of non-stop reel playing in your head and you know how everybody else is going to react to it, so you just don't say it. Doesn't stop me from saying a lot of the dumb things I think of, but essentially that's what the person, I think his name is something Weisman, says in his book. This concept of this third eye, of all of us becoming each other's panopticon observers. In this video of Colin and Samir's I was watching, where they're discussing the D'Amelio sisters and their new show on Hulu, apparently really boring to watch. I haven't seen it, so I don't know, where a bunch of these influencer kids are sitting around, and this teenager is talking about how she feels very insecure doing anything in her daily life, and the reason for that is that she is always aware, even if that might not be the case, of this third eye constantly watching. Personally, I wasn't someone who would like monitor things I do or say, and I think even now I say and do a lot of stupid things without regard for the consequences, more or less, because I just wasn't born in that age. But I can imagine how stressful it must be for kids nowadays. Like, most of these things weren't a thing when we were in school, and even then we were so insanely self-conscious, so I can only imagine how bad it is for those kids right now. And actually it's led to an increase in this syndrome. It's called, I think, the spotlight syndrome. So they used to teach us this in psychology, and I've only done very basic level psychology, so this knowledge might be a bit rusty. But as teenagers, you have this thing where you think the world revolves around you and everybody is intensely focused on every single thing that you're doing, and that usually goes away by the time you're done with puberty, etc., and then you stop caring so much what other people think. But right now, this has gotten extended to our entire lives, so it's not stopping when you stop being a teenager. And it's called the spotlight syndrome, where you think every single thing you're doing, whenever you're doing it, wherever you're doing it, is being monitored by a faceless, nameless community, which is true, I guess. Another thing is the amount of inappropriate, I don't want to say inappropriate, but like the number of naked girls I'm seeing on Instagram nowadays. Like, that is not something I'm interested in. I don't know why it's on my explore page all the time. Like, things I want to see are edits of Shang-Chi's father, which, if you've seen the movie, you know what I'm talking about. What a character. But even if, and I know how the algorithm works, like, I think I'm not a scientist or an engineer or whoever works on the algorithm, but like, if you click an image and you like it, then it should show you more of that stuff, right? And ideally, working on that principle, my entire explore page should be filled with K-drama scene edits or, you know, dogs. But it's surprisingly not. There are a lot of naked women on my explore page, and I think this is because Instagram pushes that content out, and I don't know why they do that. I mean, I can guess. There is this little thing called the beauty algorithm, which I read about, which is something that is prevalent both on Instagram and then TikTok, which basically means that they, as an app or as a platform, promote people who look conventionally attractive as opposed to people who don't. And then Instagram has this other thing, I believe, which is that if you're showing or exposing a lot of your skin, then they push your content out more than if you're covered up. I don't know how true that is, but it sounds pretty accurate. And there's like a lot of discussion and debate on whether such hypersexualization is a feminist choice, and it's a very interesting debate if you ever have the time. I saw this one TED talk by this lady who says it's not, and she says that the reason most of us can't recognize this hypersexualization as being anti-feminist is because we've been given no context for this. She compares it to growing up in a red room and then being taken out of it and being asked to describe the color red. You wouldn't be able to do it. She has these list of 7 questions, which she says that if the answer to any of these is yes, it means that you have been objectified, and a bunch of them are irrelevant. But I think one of them I thought was quite relevant for the kind of content I'm seeing on Instagram all the time, which is, and I've noted this down, does the image suggest that sexual availability is the defining characteristic of this person? And a lot of the content, which is twerking or whatever else you see, is based around this idea of sexual availability, isn't it? Then she challenges this idea that sex sells, which is incorrect. It's essentially not sex that they're selling, it's objectification, because men's magazines contain images of hypersexualized women that are treated as objects, and then women's magazines contain the same things. So if sex was selling, shouldn't women's magazines have been covered with, I don't know, shirtless pictures of Zac Efron? No disrespect to him right here, but that's the only name I could think of. But it's not, because what they're selling to men is the idea that you're an active participant in any sexual fantasy you have. So you are the actor and everybody else is just a receiver and a passive participant. And to women, that the only way you derive any value in this society is by being the perfect object of a man's sexual fantasy, for which you have to have ABC characteristics, long legs, good hair, I don't know. So that is what we have been exposed to over the years, and now suddenly there is this idea that every single thing you do as a woman is empowering. And I actually read something really cool about this thing, which said that while the ability to make a choice is feminist, the choice you make in the end might not necessarily be. I don't know how to explain this, and I want to get into this at some point, but in my head it makes perfect sense. Can objectification be for your own empowerment? And that's the idea that a lot of people are questioning nowadays. I mean, I don't have an answer to that. I mean, everybody should do whatever makes them happy, but there have been identifiable effects of self-objectification and hypersexualization that they've seen in women. Things like depression or body monitoring or lower GPA. So this idea that you have to hypersexualize yourself, or that if you hypersexualize yourself you are bound to feel more empowered, or that is in fact a sign of empowerment, feels to me a bit like winning Employee of the Month. I mean, you don't really know if you won or lost, right? And this is an argument that usually comes up in the context of the kind of videos or the kind of lyrics that a lot of female rappers or female artists are coming up with nowadays. I think this debate was really raging, for example, when Cardi B came out with her song WAP, or WAP, I call it WAP. And the argument on the side that supports this is that women have been sexualized in a lot of songs before this, so now that women are sexualizing themselves, it shouldn't be such an issue. But I don't really know who comes out at the top of it all, right? So the issue with that argument is that it views masculine qualities as being inherently superior. The idea that if you're callous or if you view other people as objects, you're somehow better than what are traditionally seen as feminine qualities of, I don't know, caring. I usually think that songs can be divided into one of three categories. First is where women talk about themselves the way male rappers have traditionally spoken about women, which is what you will see in a lot of Cardi B songs, for example. There's this other kind where I think women degrade men in the same way that men have been degrading women in songs for generations, which is problematic for reasons I don't even need to highlight. And third type is where women talk about their sexual agency with the kind of confidence that men do. And just to be clear, this is the category of songs I have absolutely no issue with and I quite enjoy them. For example, a lot of Normani's songs are great in this respect because she's enjoying sexual agency in the way men have traditionally been talked to without being disrespectful or putting masculine traits of ruthlessness, callousness on a pedestal. There's this article titled Girls Gone Raunch, and it doesn't really take a position on either side of the debate, but I think it highlights what's going on in terms of selling the lie of self-empowerment to mean, in today's context, hypersexualization or self-objectification. And the author of the article says something that I thought was pretty cool and a great way to sum up today's video. She says, forget blaming men for this travesty, this whole thing of objectification. They no longer have the hegemony they once had. They did a good job at teaching us, and now we have internalized it to such an extent that we don't need help at all. So yeah. Anyway, I'm gonna go grab dinner now. I will see you guys again next week. Ciao.